During World War II, a young American pilot narrowly escaped death after a daring raid on a heavily fortified Japanese island. But what he didn't know was the horrific fate awaiting 8 of his fellow airmen captured that same day. A fate so cruel it would remain hidden for decades. This story remained classified by the US military until 2004. While the tale's extraordinary, it's the unexpected twist at the end that will stay with you. Chichi Jima, a small Japanese island about 500 miles south of mainland Japan, became a critical hub for the Japanese military during World War II. With 2 radio towers essential for communications and surveillance, the island was heavily fortified. 25,000 troops and massive anti-aircraft guns ensured its protection. The Americans recognized the island's strategic value and sought to neutralize it. However, military strategists warned that an amphibious assault would be catastrophic, prompting the US to instead launch an extended bombing campaign to destroy the radio towers. In June 1944, American aircraft carriers surrounded the island and waves of bombers were launched. The Japanese defenses were fierce, with relentless anti-aircraft fire and dogged resistance repelling every American air raid. The mission dragged on for months, frustrating American commanders who couldn't afford to abandon the operation. By September, a new raid was planned. Among the pilots selected was 20-year-old George, the youngest aviator in the US Navy. Despite his youth, George was an experienced pilot who had already survived being shot down once before. On the morning of the mission, George and his 2-man crew, radio operator Dell and gunner Ted, boarded their plane. At 7:15 a.m., they took off with dozens of other bombers. As the planes approached the island and descended below 8,000 feet, the Japanese defenses roared to life. Anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with explosions, turning it into a deadly obstacle course for the pilots. Almost immediately, George felt his plane take a hit on the side. Despite the damage, the plane remained stable enough for him to press on. George decided to continue the dive and complete the mission. He shouted back to Ted and Dell, "Hold on!" as they plunged to 3,000 feet. At that moment, George released 2 500-pound bombs, scoring direct hits on the radio tower he was assigned to target. However, by now, George's plane was engulfed in flames and barely holding together. With the aircraft failing, George made a critical decision: fly as far from the island as possible before bailing out. Other damaged planes were already going down, their crews parachuting into the water. But George kept insisting, "Hold on!" and pushed the plane farther and farther, delaying the jump until they were dangerously close to the water, almost too late. Finally, he gave the order to bail out. Abandoning the controls, George leapt from the plane. Thankfully, his parachute deployed just in time, opening right before he hit the water, ultimately saving his life. But when he surfaced, he was horrified to find himself tangled beneath the parachute's fabric. Fighting for breath, George freed himself and scanned the horizon. George screamed for his crewmates, but there was no response. Tragically, one had died in the crash, and the other's parachute failed to deploy. His relief at surviving quickly turned to terror, as what he saw filled him with dread. On the horizon, near the edge of the island, Japanese patrol boats were speeding toward him, clearly intent on capturing him and any other survivors. Exhausted and alone, George fought to stay ahead of the patrol boats, but as they closed the gap, he braced himself for capture. But then, the roar of American aircraft filled the sky. Bombers and fighters strafed the Japanese boats, forcing them to retreat. George used the distraction to paddle further from the island. The arrival of American aircraft gave George the chance he needed. Using the distraction, he paddled furiously, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion. For 2 hours, George drifted, his body drained of energy. Just as hope began to fade, he spotted a faint shape on the horizon, a periscope cutting through the water. An American submarine had spotted George and came to his rescue. He was the only survivor from his crew, narrowly escaping the fate that awaited the 8 other airmen who were captured by the Japanese that day. Captured near the island after bailing out of their damaged aircraft, 8 American airmen fell into the hands of the Japanese soldiers stationed on Chichi Jima. Marv Merchant, a 19-year-old airman from Long Beach, California, was the first of the captured to face their wrath. Tied to a tree in the center of the camp, he became the target of hours of brutal assaults. All day, Marv endured the abuse, his comrades powerless to intervene. That night, he was taken deep into the jungle, where a grave had been freshly dug. Even in his final moments, Marv showed no fear. Once he finished his cigarette, he was beheaded. His body was buried in the grave, but his ordeal did not end there. That same night, General Yoshio Tachibana, an alcoholic infamous for his sadistic treatment of prisoners, ordered Marv's body exhumed. In his drunken state, he declared that his soldiers needed to demonstrate their fighting spirit by consuming human flesh. Tachibana commanded his soldiers to exhume Marv from his shallow grave. Once the body was retrieved, he sent for a surgeon and instructed them to remove Marv's thigh. The surgeon carried out the order, carefully extracting the thigh and handed it over to one of the cooks. Apparently, Marv's thigh, seasoned with soy sauce and paired with sake, was so flavorful that Tachibana ordered his soldiers to return and carve more meat from Marv's body, which they did. Within days, the Japanese commanders chose their next victim, Floyd Hall. He was tied to a wooden stake in the center of the rifle range, where General Tachibana ordered soldiers to practice their bayonet techniques on him. One by one, the soldiers stepped forward, driving their bayonets into Floyd Hall's chest and stomach. When Floyd succumbed to his injuries, the surgeons moved in again, removing his liver and gallbladder. Earl Vaughan was next. Fully aware of what awaited him, he resolved to meet death on his own terms. As the soldiers moved to tie him to a stake, he resisted with all his strength, defiantly shouting "Semper Fi" at the Japanese. He repeatedly extended his neck and pointed to it, demanding a clean and swift death by beheading. "Behead me! Behead me!" The Japanese, however, intended to strap him to a wooden post so the other soldiers could practice their bayonet techniques on him. But Earl's fierce resistance made this nearly impossible. He fought them off, continuing to expose his neck in defiance. Earl's bravery caught the soldiers off guard. Frustrated, they subdued him and delivered a swift execution. But his defiance left an indelible mark on those who witnessed it. And then again these surgeons came running out into the field, and in plain sight of the now 5 remaining American captives, they removed Earl's liver and his gallbladder and then wrapped them in cellophane paper to preserve them. And that night, all the high-ranking officers on the island feasted on Earl and Floyd. Within days of Floyd and Earl's executions, the remaining 5 captives were also killed one by one, each forced to witness the other's deaths. Tragically, 2 of the 5 were also cannibalized, and in one horrifying case, the victim was not executed beforehand. Instead, parts of their body were surgically amputated while they were still alive, and those pieces were then cooked and consumed, and when they were done eating them, they would just come back and cut off more and more and more until there was nothing left to eat. After the war, 34 Japanese soldiers were tried for their crimes on Chichi Jima. General Tachibana and several others were sentenced to death by hanging. Many others, however, served only brief prison terms before being released. Decades later, George H.W. Bush, the young pilot who narrowly escaped Chichi Jima, learned of the atrocities committed against his fellow airmen. He was horrified and carried a deep sense of survivor's guilt, questioning whether he had made the right decisions during the mission. However, George didn't waste his second chance at life. He went on to become the 41st President of the United States, profoundly shaping the world during his tenure. His son, George W. Bush, later became the 43rd President, continuing the legacy of leadership. Had George H.W. Bush been captured that day near Chichi Jima, history might have turned out very differently. His survival not only saved his life, but also shaped the course of global events, leaving a legacy that endures to this day. The untold story of Chichi Jima is a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the resilience of the human spirit. For George H.W. Bush, it was a narrow escape that shaped a lifetime of leadership. For the 8 airmen, it was a sacrifice remembered as one of the darkest chapters of the Pacific War. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.